So, hey everybody, thanks for joining us for this Wikipedia editing session. Today's focus is Wikipedia and nonprofits, but if you are not associated with a nonprofit, that's a-okay, because we're going to talk about things regarding Wikipedia that will still be educational for you on this webinar. So we've just told you that we are To The Point Collaborative and have been around for over 25 years. Working with nonprofits and others. All right, my page down doesn't seem to want to work. There it goes. And I'm Kendall Leeper, and I've been working in Wikipedia for over 6 years. And my co-host here, my co-pilot, is Dan Cook, and he's been working in Wikipedia for about 10 years. And so we're going to share the things that we've learned and tell you how we like to work with nonprofits today. So our agenda has 3 main highlights. We want to talk to you about why it's important to keep the information on your page up to date, because people often come there and meet you for the first time. We're going to go over a couple of client examples, some nonprofits that we've worked with, and then we're going to talk to you about how we work with nonprofits when we engage in Wikipedia. So part 1, the importance of keeping your page up to date. Wikipedia oftentimes is the first place that someone may encounter your organization. You do a Google search and it usually comes up at the top of the page, and people want an overview of your company that is objective. Sometimes our websites have a lot of marketing language and things like that. So people want to see objectively what editors are adding about your company and talking about your company. And it's good for potential donors, volunteers, future board members for sure. And the reason why the first impression is so important and why it makes a good first impression if it's up to date is because Google loves Wikipedia. The information on Wikipedia is considered well-sourced and objective, and Google Analytics take that and really make your article rise to the top through SEO. So Wikipedia is definitely a trusted source according to Google. All right, Dan, I know you're a rule lover. Do you want to talk about how you should always follow these rules in Wikipedia?
Yes. So one of the things that most people don't understand about Wikipedia, we're told that anybody can edit Wikipedia, right? Well, that's not exactly true, because if you don't edit it in the right way, you can be blocked from editing it for all time. So especially for those of us who are considered to be in a conflict of interest situation, you have to understand that you never directly edit your article. In other words, do not go in, call up the article, go into the HTML and start to type things in. You might get away with it for a while, but eventually someone is going to challenge your right to do that. So number 1, we want your takeaway today to be, don't directly edit that article. Take a step back and learn how to do it ethically. As an employee of your nonprofit, you are automatically in a conflict of interest if you try and edit that page. There's lots of different conflict of interest definitions for Wikipedia. For instance, if Kendall and I were to edit a client's article directly, that would be a conflict of interest for us because we are considered to be paid. Mm-hmm. So you are in a conflict of interest as either an employee, a board member, or a volunteer of your organization. So that means you need to ask for help in editing. Before you do that, you need to be completely transparent about who you are and your relationship to that organization or organizations.
Dan, I'm hearing that your microphone is having a hard time.
Oh, my microphone?
Yeah. Kendall, are you noticing, Dan?
It's intermittent. Right now it's good, but it is intermittent static.
All right, let's try headphones, shall we?
While Dan's plugging in his headphones, I just want to mention that an employee relationship and a contractor like us, that's not the only conflict of interest. So if a board member were to, want to be helpful and make changes directly to your article, or if your best friend started an organization and you want to go on and make changes to their page, that's still considered a conflict of interest. So if you have any relationship to a page that you want to edit, that's considered a conflict of interest.
Yeah, I mean, the key here, how's that sound?
Great.
I'm not listening.
Okay. Yeah, the key here is that you want to disclose who you are, that you have a conflict of interest, that you want help, and you want to make sure no one else in your organization is editing the article. You want to be in charge of doing it.
Mm-hmm. We do see that often. Sometimes employees feel they're being helpful and they go in and directly edit a page. So next are the benefits to keeping your page up to date. Fundraising is definitely a #1 priority for nonprofits, and keeping your page updated with current financials and the things that you've achieved recently is really big for somebody that's trying to decide where they might want to spend their fundraising dollars. We have a couple of new clients, nonprofit clients, and one of them has financial information dated back to 2014. So they want to update that. And then we have another organization that has done a lot in the COVID efforts, and they didn't have any updates on their page since 2018. So we're working with them to get that on there.
Yeah, and keep in mind too, it's like if your page is out of date and your direct competitors is updated properly, you are at a disadvantage.
Yes, exactly. Another benefit is if you're an organization that relies a lot on community participation, volunteers may be looking to check you out and see what you do and see if you, I kind of liken it to having your resume up to date. If you go into a job interview and your resume isn't up to date, someone might not take you seriously. And if somebody wants to volunteer or donate, they might want to see that you're up to date on your information. Here's another really important, here's another really important one is if you are looking at your Wikipedia page on a regular basis, then you can contribute to managing the article. So there could be instances where kids might hack your page in class, or somebody that has a bone to pick with you wants to add some information, or a volunteer may add information that's not quite worded correctly. And so you can have control over those things by watching your page. And then amazing SEO, as I mentioned before, the SEO goes up because of Google and Wikipedia's relationship.
And keep in mind, all that SEO is a great thing if your page is up to date, not so good if it isn't.
Yeah, you don't want to attract that attention unless you have your best foot forward. So here's an example of a client that we worked with a couple of years ago when we talk about SEO. The League of American Orchestras had an out-of-date page, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But you can see that when you search for them on Google, they come up, their Wikipedia article comes up #4 on the search. And the benefit of that is that you get this really nice information box here of their logo and of a little description of them and your website. And a link to the Wikipedia article and your website. So they could choose either, but it's very handy for going to Wikipedia and
Google automatically generates that. That's something you have no control over. If you're on Wikipedia, Google will generate that little window there.
Yes, and even though the link is #4, this box comes up at the top of the page.
Yeah,
the very top right. All right. Do you want to start with our client examples?
Sure. Again, we work with quite a few nonprofits to help them with their Wikipedia articles. The League of American Orchestras. I mean, we do respect it. Clients want to be confidential. We of course respect that. But the League of American Orchestras is fine with us referencing the work we've done with them. They came to us, and that the page was pretty far out of date, and it was concerning them because people were going there when they were doing fundraising and they weren't getting the right information. So we worked with Rochelle there to help her understand how she could manage this page. And what we were able to do, here it is before. For instance, up here, it was a network of approximately 800 orchestras. And that's just one example of many details that were out of date. Their logo was out of date, which was also very troubling to them. So then, after we worked with them for a few months, and she connected with some helpful volunteer editors, this is what began to happen. We got the new logo in there. We updated that number. We expanded their history section. And overall, I mean, if you go to that article today, you'll see a very different one than was up there in 2017.
And as you usually like to point out about Rochelle, she became an amazing editor and developed great relationships with Wikipedia editors. So,
and she still goes back in there and updates that page with the help of the volunteer groups. And every so often, she'll check in with us just to make sure she's doing it right. Because one thing that you need to understand about Wikipedia, if you are going to be in charge of managing your page the way Rochelle is with this, Wikipedia is constantly changing the rules of conflict of interest editing. Mm-hmm. And so it's really important to know what the latest is. And we know the latest because we're studying that stuff every day to make sure that we're on top of it.
All right, this was another client that you worked with directly.
Ah, yes, Fund for the Public Interest. They are, they're part of the Public Interest Research Group family of nonprofits, and PIRG, as it's known, has been one of our longtime clients. And this particular Wikipedia page had negative information in it. And they said, is there anything we can do about this? We feel like it's kind of unfair. It was sort of an isolated incident. So we worked with them, and this is where you can see, so it's when you called up their Wikipedia article, the first page that you saw on your computer was this thing that said lawsuits against the fund. So, and keep in mind, I'm sure you're the same as most people. When if you're going to Wikipedia, just quickly looking for information on something, you may not scroll down at all. You may only look and see the info box and mm-hmm. the lead and maybe some history. Mm-hmm. So here's how we help them. What we did was we expanded the info box. We also expanded the number of sections in the article, which expanded the table of contents. We added a note on where the name came from. This was already in the article, but it was buried. And so what we had them discuss with the volunteers was, doesn't it make more sense to explain the name higher up? And doesn't it make more sense to talk about our operations rather than our history first? Because what people are going to want to know is, what is it they do, not what's their history. Mm-hmm. And so the volunteers agreed that that was a better structure to the article. Well, what it did was it pushed that negative information down well below that first page. So now when you look at that article, if you're just going on there to find out who they are and what they do, and you're not scrolling, you don't see the stuff about the lawsuits.
And just in case, if you don't already know this, if something is in your article and it's truthful and well-sourced, you can't just out of hand delete it from a page. The editors will not allow that to happen. So there are ways to manage that sometimes depending on the situation.
Yeah, and we have helped people remove things items that are negative, that are very old and no longer reflect the character of the organization. But it's tough if something already has mm-hmm. good references to support it.
Mm-hmm. All right, part 3. We're already at part 3. how we work with nonprofits. So we want to talk a little bit about our relationship with our clients. There are different options that we offer. We have trained people in the past, and oh, I see my numbers are out of sync here, but there we've got our 5 options here. Sometimes we train people and they do it for a little bit and then they decide they're too busy and they come back and we do the work for them. But as Dan mentioned, things change pretty rapidly in what works best in Wikipedia. And so this particular scenario right now seems to be the most accepted and successful. So if we're talking a little bit about, I just heard the train in the background. If we're talking a little bit about work division or how we work together, what we do for the changes and the updates you want to make is we work together in Google Docs to draft the content. And sometimes our clients prefer to do that themselves. And other times they ask us to do it, but we definitely work together. If we do a draft for you, you review it and sign off. And then to the point, we'll make sure that the content has the right neutral and balanced tone for Wikipedia. And then we will also make, oh, and it has the right citations. That's very important. So
you want to explain what a citation is, by the way? I'm not sure everybody knows what that means.
Any fact that you add to a Wikipedia article has to have a media source to back it up.
Or academic. Academic's fine too. But yes, credibility of the source is the most important thing.
So you may notice when you're looking at a Wikipedia article that there's a little sort of like a super text number in brackets, and that relates to the source at the bottom of the page that backs up that particular fact. And we're not going to get into this discussion today, but there's definitely a list of acceptable citation sources and some that are not allowed to be used. So we check for that. And then sources have to be formatted in a particular wiki syntax in order to be posted on Wikipedia. And so we do that for you. And then, as Dan mentioned earlier, in a conflict of interest situation, you're not able to edit a page yourself. So what we do is we propose the changes on a top page of an article. And I have an example of that coming up here in the slides. And that's usually accompanied by a note that says, hello, I am associated with such and such, and our page is out of date. And we feel that these updates would really improve our page. Can you review them and provide feedback? And so we do all of that writing for you, and then all you have to do is copy and paste that onto the talk page, and we'll walk you through all the steps. So here's a talk page. Dan, do you want to go over how the talk page works here?
Yeah.
I think this was your client.
Sure, this was PERG, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, clean water. Okay, yeah. So every Wikipedia article, if you call up an article and look at it, most people just look at the article, but you'll notice that there's a little button to the right of article at the top that says talk. And the talk pages are essential if you are going to be managing your page, because this is where you'll be doing all your interaction with the volunteers. So what we do is we guide you through creating a message that you're going to send, put on the talk page, asking for help in improving the page. So here's an example of this. She's disclosed that she has a conflict of interest. She'd like to improve the page, disclosed her conflict on her user page. And so here's the suggestions that she's making. And she makes them very specific, you know, so that the volunteer who sees this doesn't have to spend hours trying to figure out what it is she's asking for help with. So
very important.
Yeah, so this here that's her request. And then down here, you can see the reply from this volunteer, Spintendo. So they went back and forth, and Spintendo was very helpful in improving the PERG page because he understood that it was out of date, and he doesn't want a nonprofit's page to be out of date. He understands how important that is. So he was really very helpful in updating that page?
So this process actually we call an edit request. So that's what we use the talk page for, is to request an edit rather than make it ourselves.
Yep.
All right, so to summarize the webinar here, we just want to remind you that the reason it's good to have your Wikipedia page up to date and the information is to make a good first impression when someone is looking to learn about you and see what you do. The advantage of being on top of your page is so that you can manage the article, and you can look at things that might not be accurate, or if someone posted something that's not true, or anything like that. Looking at it on a regular basis will help you be able to manage that information. And that way you will get the right kind of attention from the people that are interested in you. And the process that we talked about in working with you just makes it easier for nonprofits to update their pages.
Yeah, and it's an ongoing thing. When you decide to update your article, this becomes really part of your job. It's part of your reputation management for your organization.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's just something you need to work into your schedule. You might only look at it once a quarter once you get it where you need it to be, but you'll begin to realize the importance once you work there. We do have a question, and that is, when we look at an existing article, are there changes or improvements that are more achievable to make happen than others? Yeah, well,
Yes.
like for instance, anything that's a specific detail, like a financial number, a change in leadership, anything that's a statistic or a detail like that, volunteers are very eager to update that information. And it's always a good place to start.
I also want to add to that, this is related to a client that's not a nonprofit, but oftentimes people will say, can we add awards and accolades to our page? And that often is looked upon as questionable by volunteer editors, because it's a little bit more markety and they have what they call corporate oversight that they are very mindful of watching. So I oftentimes suggest that we save those edits until the end, until we've made the ones that seem a little bit more acceptable and easier to get through, and then try to make, if the client insists, then we try to make those edits as well.
Yeah, and also Hannah, I am looking at your organization's page now, and this is another example of where you really don't have any references that are acceptable by Wikipedia standards. So what I would suggest you do is look at a few other organizations that are similar to yours, and see if you can find some that have good media citations to support the information. I mean, the first thing I would recommend if we were working with you to do would be to add sources for the information that's already there. That's a great starting point, a great way to ask for help. People are going to want to help you, but you need to be able to, you need to have those sources ready to share with them, so that when they do reach out, respond to you, you can say, well, here's the references that will support what's already in the article.
Actually, Hannah, I'd like to chat with you about looking at that for a few minutes if you want to do that, and just, spend 20 minutes going over your page and maybe talking about your media coverage and seeing what's possible for your page. So if you're interested in that, you can put your contact information in the chat and we can talk later. So we do offer free consulting sessions, but I would just like to really talk to you about that.
Yeah, because we do love nonprofits, and they do tend to get more love from the editors on Wikipedia. So, it isn't particularly difficult to have some improvements.
Do we have any other questions?
I don't see any. And we are at 11:29, and we did say that we would get everybody back home at the half-hour mark.
And we did it. We kept our promise.
Well, we always keep our promises, but I have to tell you, we're very careful about what promises we make.
Especially
for
in
instance,
Wikipedia.
with Wikipedia,
Yeah.
we never guarantee results. We only
No.
guarantee that we will devote our expertise to your cause.
And try everything we can.
Yes, yes. We know a few tricks.
Mhm.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for attending. And also this is being recorded, and I'm going to share the link with the people who signed up for the webinar so that if they want to review the information, they will have that.
Great. All right. Well, thank you for attending.
And thank you, Tor, for monitoring, and Kendall for being Kendall.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.